Welcome to the Zoe Routh Leadership Podcast, where we explore the future and what this means for your leadership. We ask the big questions. What's happening on the horizon? What does this mean for us? And most importantly, what skills do I need now for leadership of the future? It's time to explore. Let's go.
Hi, welcome back to the show. This is Zoe, and my question for you today is, how do you deal with a narcissist? Yep, we've all got them in our lives and workplaces, unfortunately. So how do we spot them and how do we deal with them? My guest today will help us dig into that, and more on her in just a moment. Meanwhile, on Planet Human, guess what? The building blocks of life have appeared on an asteroid called Bennu in one of NASA's OSIRIS-REx missions. So they've got a little sample of this asteroid, which harks back in its data dating some 4.5 billion years ago to the origins of our solar system. And they've discovered it's got the ingredients potentially of life, not life itself, but the building blocks of life, like phosphorus. It has signs that it comes from an ancient oceanic origin. That is super cool. That means in our solar system, there was other, perhaps, oceanic entities, satellites, planets, moons, etc., that could foster life, host life, or have fostered and hosted life. Very exciting things happening out in the space world there. Back on planet Earth, artificial intelligence is being tasked with decoding chicken speech. I love those two stories side by side. Go from, yes, life could be out there in the universe alongside us, to how do chickens talk to each other and what does it mean? Both those things are exciting. So why is it exciting to find out how chickens are talking to each other? Because it will actually start to help us understand another species, and we can apply the same technology to other animals. And when we can understand how animals are communicating their messages, I am hoping and intentional that this will help develop our greater sense of empathy and connection to all sentient beings, which is good for all living beings and fulfills my mission. So yes, you can learn about what a chicken means when they say buck, buck, and buck, 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 ah! I'm super excited by that. On Planet Zoe, we have the conclave happening this week. So if you're listening to this episode as it comes out, the Leadership Conclave is happening on March the 1st, 2024 in Complicity, which is in the ACT just south of Canberra, in a beautiful location run by my friends Criminali at the ancient, it's not that ancient, but it is old, the homestead of Complicity. And it is going to be a small gathering, intimate gathering of leaders to do some reflection on leadership, power, and legacy. I love it. I'm so excited to bring these people together to do this big picture thinking. All right. Also on Planet Zoe, if you would like an advanced reader's copy of my latest novel called Olympus Bound, which is the sequel to the Olympus Project and the third book in the Gaia Enterprises series, it is officially launching May the 1st, but you can get an ebook copy for review now. All you have to do is click the link in the show notes and apply to be an advanced reader, and you'll get the ebook version that you can read. And if you feel so moved, and I hope you do, to write a review, an honest review about what you thought about the book. And I'll give you links once you're into the ARC process on where to do that, on Goodreads, Amazon, anywhere you like. Okay, that really does help enormously to help spread the word about the book and to get other people interested in reading it, because that is one of the biggest challenges as an independent author, is how to get traction and visibility of your work. Phew. And if you're interested in these pioneering concepts around leadership and how that might play out into the future, as I set them on the moon in this one, then this could be the story for you. Okay, that's it. Now, on to our guest this week. Her name is Lindsay Ruiz, and I was introduced to her by another guest who said, you need to talk to this lady. She knows a lot about narcissism in the workplace. I'm like, oh, that is something that I'm forever talking to leaders about. How do we deal with these difficult people, narcissists in particular, when we bump into them? Her experience is across multiple Fortune 500 companies, heading up organizational transformation and complex technology deployments. And in the meantime, she's been fascinated by narcissists and how they play out in their power experiences in the workplace. So, without further ado, here is Lindsay. So all the way from North Carolina, welcome to the show, Lindsay Ruiz.
Super excited to be here with you, Zoe, and ready for this conversation. And hopefully your audience will find little nuggets of wisdom they can use in their own lives.
I hope so. But then at the same time, I'm depressed because that means that everybody's got a touch of narcissists in their life, which is a bit sad. So before we get to the sad part of talking about what are narcissists, who are they, how do we spot them, how the heck did you get interested and involved in this kind of work?
It's a life journey initially. I was born in Venezuela, I should say that. I was born and raised in South America, immigrant in the United States for 22 years. And in my trajectory through life, I came across a couple of important incidents that later on I got to recognize as being involved and somewhat sucked into what is called narcissistic abuse through my family, through my marriage. And then later on, starting to recognize the pattern of how this plays out as well in my professional life. So when I decided to complete the, let's say, highest level of education I have achieved so far, which is my doctorate in organization development and change, I decided that I was going to use my doctoral research to land all these situations, all these experiences and ideas and things that I had come across with for my own self-development and coping with these kinds of situations into some kind of documentation that then could serve other people to also learn and take their journeys into a complete different direction in an easier way than I did.
Yeah, it sounds very unfun. Just the term narcissistic abuse puts up a whole bunch of alarm bells. So let's start there. What is a narcissist and what is narcissistic abuse?
It is definitely unfun and the most, complicated situation nowadays to talk about this is that the topic itself has been trivialized and there's a lot of mainstream conversations and information that sometimes is misguiding. And so people kind of turn off to the conversation, but it's a real issue. It has its roots in psychology and mental disorders and personality disorders that often don't get diagnosed in the therapy room when it's timing to do so. And so there are certain coping mechanisms that, some people get to develop during their infant and teen years coming out of dysfunctional dynamics within their family nucleus that pretty much turn their mental well-being into a wounded way to see the world. These people develop maladaptive coping mechanisms. They basically show traits of immaturity that should outgrow the individual as you get into an adulthood stage, but they get trapped into their childhood experiences in a very dysfunctional way and unhealthy way and turn them into individuals that are, very insecure, that have fragile self-esteem, which they cope by pretending to be superior to others, pretending that they're the ones that deserve everything in the world, all the attention, all the benefits. They turn into power and control to achieve that. They look at other people as objects. And those of us who have been targeted understand that we have been objectified to be a means to an end, whatever that is for this person. And the most pervasive and the most really sad, like you said, trait is the lack of empathy that they portray. They lose their capacity to empathize with others, to feel the feelings of other people and to connect at a more human level with their surroundings. And so they carry around secret feelings of insecurity, shame, humiliation, fear of being exposed that then turn them into predators, basically, of those who may threaten their fantasy of grandiosity. I'm not a psychologist, so I don't want to pretend that I have a clinical background on the issue, but just simply by studying, right, trying to understand other people's behaviors and trying to come with some kind of awareness as to how you deal with these kinds of individuals, you get to learn some of the patterns and some of the behavioral traits that come along with that.
Okay, so I just want to check I've understood you correctly. So narcissism in your research shows that it stems from potentially from early childhood wounds. It's a maladaptive strategy to deal with something bad that happened to them, and it's turned them into a dysfunctional, I was going to say, but that's not what you used, unhelpful way of being in the world, which abuses or puts other people as objects to be mined and resourced for your own means. So it's a nurtured kind of attribute, narcissism, as opposed to one that you're born with. Is that correct?
Well, that depends on who you get the perspective from. There may be 2 or 3 potential causes of especially narcissistic personality disorder, because I think it's worth mentioning narcissism lives in a spectrum. Some people, and most of us, if not all of us, have some kind of narcissistic trait, which is what potentially drives our desire for, career growth. And it's pretty much intrinsic to our drive to achieve things in life, and somewhat tied to our self-esteem in certain capacity. But there is the spectrum when extreme could be considered narcissistic personality disorder. And that is where you may find different points of view, because it's a very complex diagnosis that may be linked to 3 potential causes. One, obviously, the environment, like you mentioned, that parent-child relationship, where either too much, admiration, adoration, attention to the child, or too much criticism, downgrading, treatment, the same lack of empathy, the same attachment wound between the child and the parent may cause the child to have experiences that create, the scar down the road that gives them that disorder as an individual in how they see the world. But there are also research from other, clinicians that attribute it to some genetics, inherited characteristics, such as, certain personality traits that may run in the family that may get triggered and activated through the trauma that these individuals may be experiencing when they're growing up. And there are now newer research that points out some neurobiology causes as well. Obviously, the connection between the brain, the behavior, and thinking is something that we know nowadays that can morph and can be explained in a little more deeper way. That could also be ingrained in how we could see the complexity of the disorder at that level.
It doesn't sound like a very fun place to be either to be on the receiving end of narcissistic abuse or to be the narcissist themselves. I mean, if they're pretending to be superior, if they're hiding the sense of insecurity, they're seeking power to control others, and they lose empathy, what kind of life experience is that? It's very disconnected, I'm guessing. Are these people very unhappy? Tell me a little bit about their emotional world, apart from the dynamics we've already touched on.
And I may be a little subjective with this because I cannot speak for the experience of one of them. I can just only speak from the recipient side of it. And obviously what I read and studied from not only the existing, resources out there, but also interviewing other victims for my own research. But my take on the situation as to how these people may experience the world may not be as undesirable because, first of all, they lack self-awareness. They know what they're doing, but they're not doing it from a place of wanting to connect to who they are and wanting to change who they are. It's a very ingrained skill that is how they know how to navigate the world, how to get what they want. And they also are very good at getting what they want. So it works. So I don't think that makes them at all miserable individuals until somebody comes along and becomes a threat to them. So they will do anything in their power to bring this person down, to take him out of the way, to avoid by any means being exposed to embarrassment, being exposed to being seen as a fraud, to being found out is probably the biggest fear and the moment where they might experience some kind of negative feelings, and it's all very self-centered anyway. It's all about self-protection. So it's very interesting, your question, because part of the data that I collected from other victims, something they all coincided on is their perception that no matter what they did to deal with this person or these people or this group of people, the narcissist always wins. They always get away with their behavior. They always get away with their pursuit, especially in the workplace, which was the focus of my research. Very seldom do they suffer the consequences of the abuse that they inflict on other people, which doesn't sound like a really bad place to be for them.
Okay, there's lots to unpack around that. And that's not a fabulous piece of awareness. Narcissist always wins and get what they want, especially in the workplace. That makes me feel even more depressed when we're thinking about this. So let's tease out a little bit. I want to understand a little bit more. You mentioned earlier that controlling their environment to get what they want. So they're very attracted to power and they're very good at getting what they want. Tell me a little bit about that dynamic, the seeking of power and getting what they want. And then the third piece, how do they get away with it? So how does that all work? So they seek power, they get away with it. What happens?
They use various tactics that are manipulative to begin with, to continue to aggrandize themselves and find some place in the organization that quote unquote recognizes what they deserve, right? They're going to do anything and find any place within the organization that confirms their fantasy that they are better and bigger and more that they in actuality, are and offer. These are, individuals that may make achievements look and their own talents look bigger than they actually are. They may develop very good and effective ways to navigate the political environment in an organization, to cozy up to people to which they have exposure, to use their charisma and their ability to be social with others as the means to position themselves and self-promote in the organization. They will take advantage of other people's work and other people's orbit to make themselves appear powerful and influential.
Can I just interrupt for a second? I'm curious though, so if they have no self-awareness, but they know how to manipulate and they know how to use charisma, what is it that they're aware of here? Is they're not obviously aware of what's behind their own motives and potentially not aware of their impact on others in a negative way. How is it that they have charisma?
Well, it's actually a signature trait of narcissism that they will develop a false self, right? A persona that is likable is their entry point to be able to either be liked and paid attention to and or prey on people and gain their trust to then create the cycle of abusive instances that help them gain the power and the control that they want. It's like a bait.
It's like a bait and switch.
Yeah.
No, I was just reiterating. So I understand it's the bait and switch. They put up their false self persona so that they can swoop in and take advantage of the dynamic. So they kind of play false until they can get what they want. So I'm curious because psychopaths are, as I understand it, also have this ability to be charismatic, influential, and sort of similar traits. So what's the difference between a psychopath and a narcissist?
They're actually, I don't know if you've heard of the dark triad. Narcissism, psychopathy, and Machiavellianism are part of what is called the dark triad, which is referred to as dark personalities. So they are all part of the same spectrum that is called a cluster B personalities. They're very similar in that the narcissist lacks empathy, seeks attention, and everything that they do to other people is creating a means to an end. A psychopath do all of that, but one of the main characteristics of a psychopath is that they lack remorse and that they just get, I don't know if fulfillment is that they enjoy making other people suffer. It doesn't necessarily have to be a mean to an end. It's just how they see their power being materialized, if you will. But they're all family personalities in the same compound of disorders, in the most dangerous disorders in the spectrum, for real.
The third one is the Machiavellian. The dark triad includes the Machiavellian one. How is that different to either narcissist or psychopath?
Well, I believe that is really the most evil of the three of them. And is also very founded in adoration. This is probably where you see cult leaders, for example, falling under, where they need to build this kind of tribe that pretty much they can control in masses, and they can put some where they are the true center of the truth and they expect everybody to follow their truth as the only truth. And it's like a more exaggerated way to talk about narcissism and psychopathy in just one individual.
Thank you, Lindsay. I appreciate making that distinction. Okay, so coming back.
Yeah.
Narcissism seems pretty tame compared to Machiavellianism and cult leaders. So let's go back to that. How is it that narcissists always get away with it? How? How is that even possible?
Yeah, and that were the basis of my research, really. I didn't go to study the individual. I came to really study the systems in which these individuals thrive and where these victims suffer, basically. One of the main reasons why they thrive and they get away with things is because there is institutional complicity in terms of who gets elevated as a leader, what are the traits that, organizations, consciously or unconsciously may be rewarding in the organization, especially those organizations that are very competitive in nature may seek individuals like them because they thrive at getting ahead of others, no matter what gets in the way of it. But then there's also institutional betrayal when an individual who has been targeted and wants to report any kind of abuse or any kind of bullying or any kind of experiences like this, it does not receive the support that they need to come forward with their complaint and with their experience, because it becomes a liability to the organization. And so very seldom, unless it is a very obvious, case of abuse, such as sexual harassment or discrimination or anything that's very tangible and also within the legal framework to be addressed, there's no frame of reference and there's no mechanism to support victims that may be actually receiving narcissistic abuse on their end behind closed doors. Because as you and I are talking about here, first of all, it's very complex. It has a lot of nuance in terms of the clinical pathology, the spectrum of it, the understanding of how it happens and when it happens and whether or not the evidence is sufficient to call it abuse or not. And companies are not equipped, basically, to deal with it when it's so subtle, when it's not that evident. Just like in domestic violence, right? When a spouse gets abused at home and it's only psychological abuse or emotional abuse, it's really hard to prove it. You have to have a bruise in your face to be able to say, this person hit me. So it's a very similar circumstance, and we don't have the legal frameworks. We don't have the internal mechanisms to support people coming forward with this type of issues and pointing out these type of behaviors effectively to get them addressed.
Okay. So I love that you point out that there's systemic issues in the workplace that contribute to the thriving of narcissists. And I hear that the lack of support and diagnostic capability is one aspect of that. More interesting, both are interesting. I think more more useful is actually looking at how leaders get appointed in the first place. And you spoke to, if there's competitiveness in the workplace, then that is a contributing factor that can elevate narcissists who can be ruthless in their competition. What other aspects of appointment systems contribute to allowing narcissists to be moved into leadership roles and to thrive there?
There are two more that I can put. I mean, we could name and be on this in this conversation for a very, very long time, because it's really pervasive, and there's so many different points in the selection process, the hiring process, and the promotion process. But two of the main dysfunctional attributes that an organization has in place to continue to promote these kinds of people. Number one, organizations are political environments. So sometimes they elevate people who are very successful at navigating the politics and becoming shield for other things that may be happening within the organization. And they consider that a leadership quality. The other mechanism, or the other way in which it propagates, has to do with the fact that sometimes organizations don't dig into a person's actual achievements versus somebody who is building themselves up in the shoulders of other people, taking credit for other people's ideas, using their teams or using their immediate, environments and people that they work with or people who work for them to give credit what credit belongs and to elevate other people into organizations. So what they do is they take what everybody else is producing and creating and working on for their own benefit and to showcase it as their own, in their own ecosystem. They don't bring their team along with them. And so without the internal check and balances to really determine whether a person's achievements are real, for sure, something they've accomplished is measurable, and with the emphasis on, in order for you to be promoted, in order for you to be a part of the, the higher ranks, you have to be really good at navigating politics and not rocking the boat and not being somebody that speaks truth to power. It makes it really easy for those individuals to continue to move through the organization into positions of really high level. And I think the charisma is another point. Because, especially in today's world, right? You want people that are really good at, speaking in public, really good at telling the story of the organization, being able to connect with other people, even if it is at a superficial level. And these individuals are really good at that.
And when people speak truth to power, that does it makes people in power uncomfortable because there's that accountability piece. Can you talk a little bit more about that, about why it's so difficult to speak truth to power?
Yes. My personal take on that is it's difficult because, number one, we don't know how to create environments that enable dissent and that enable discourse, right? Our organizations are typically more or less a dictatorship. We tell you what you're going to do. You come here, do it. We pay you, you go home. You have certain latitude to contribute ideas and to bring solutions, but not necessarily to point out what we're doing wrong. And that doesn't facilitate the conversation. I think sometimes it's blown out of proportion that the idea of speaking truth to power is to challenge authority other than to try to have a constructive conversation as to what we can do better and be honest about it. I mean, there are some efforts to help us get there, and some organizations are more progressive in that mentality. But anything that could expose an organization's, in what's happening behind the curtain gets scrutinized, right? And you could be putting your career on the line in that sense. So a lot of people choose not to do that, and they prefer to play it safe, legitimately. Especially if you don't have an advocate, if you don't have, if you're not doing it in a group where there's more power to the voice being brought to the table. especially if you are in an underrepresented community, in a minority group, where you don't have somebody else that looks like you, that is supporting you and bringing your voice across the table to express certain things that may be dysfunctional or even abusive, And companies are always going to look for ways to protect themselves against any kind of lawsuit or any kind of whistleblowing or anything when it becomes as major as that, which is not always the case. And I think, in my view, it's kind of silly, because I know for fact and for the work that I do that people typically wants to share, their truth to people in power who can do something about it. And I see that as a good thing. And we would be avoiding so many, tragic ends to those situations if we were just willing to sit down and have a conversation and listen and find solutions together. But that's not always how it happens. And so it kind of prevents and holds people back from telling the truth and challenging their leaders in holding them accountable, because their livelihoods depend on the paychecks that they get. And they also have their own reputations to protect, and they also have career aspirations to protect. And it becomes more and more complicated from there.
You mentioned a couple of organizations that were making progress in this area, that were actually a bit of leading lights. What are they doing differently?
The organizations that I see making a genuine effort to change that and to build environments that are conducive of honest conversations, their top leaders are aligned in the fact that it's better to bring the issues to the table as soon as possible, to create what is now called safe environments, where people can sit down and have, debates and have dissent and disagree and pursue healthy friction with the purpose of surfacing what's at the root of an issue, to solve it and to create a solution that could be much better than, the possibilities that are in front of them. And the leaders are modeling that and are requesting that and are creating spaces to multiply the proof that when people do that, there are no repercussions, that it is absolutely okay, and that those behaviors are rewarded, as a matter of fact. And it's coming from leaders who are healthy themselves, right? None of us are exempt to some kind of wound and some kind of trauma and some kind of, things that we have to work through in our own lives. And these leaders are committed to themselves to heal and to grow and to show compassion and to have integrity. And that transpires into those type of practices.
Is it possible for a narcissist to get treatment and become a non-narcissist?
Well, the consensus on the clinical side, based on my research and what I read, is that they can pursue treatment for sure, but nobody becomes a non-narcissist. So let me explain. Well, first of all, very few of them actually seek treatment because, as I mentioned earlier, they don't think there's nothing wrong with them. They may be conscious of what they do, but they don't think it's wrong. They don't have the capacity to have a sound judgment as to, what I'm doing is hurting other people, right? They think they deserve whatever it is in front of them. Therefore, the way that they go about it is perfectly okay. And when you don't have the capacity to recognize that something is not conducive of you being a good ethical person, and when you don't have empathy to recognize that what you do hurt others, you don't pursue any kind of treatment. So it's really a zero-sum game. And because of that, the consensus is that it's really hard to eradicate it. And those who do pursue treatment may develop some level of conscience about what they do and who they do it to, and become aware of it. But it is an ingrained behavior. It is already ingrained in their wiring for them to overcome it. And so they may be, in therapy for a very, very, very long time or forever, which is also very satisfying because it gives them all the undivided attention that they always crave.
It just reinforces it.
Yeah, a lot of therapists will say that they would prefer not to treat narcissists because it becomes a very codependent relationship, and because they lie, and because they fantasize, and because they're always the victim, and so without the ability to take accountability for your life and for what you do to others and for wanting to change, even if they go to therapy, they may do that because they enjoy the attention that they get.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I'm wondering also if narcissists band together, can they attract other narcissists so they become like this cluster of narcissistics in power structures? I can imagine that can happen because they would just use each other to get what they want so they can see collective power. So you're nodding. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a natural tendency, and it's almost justifiable, especially if you're in an organization that works under, high pressure, high demand, competing with the market demands, nonstop, and needing to win under any circumstance. You need people with that kind of drive and that kind of stamina, and people who are not affected emotionally and who don't get wrapped up in sensitivities about, we need to lay off a bunch of people. Well, a regular person may have a little remorse and may think, oh my gosh, what is going to happen with those individuals? They might be thinking, well, this is great for the company because our stock price is just going to go up immediately. They make the organization, quote unquote, thrive in their circumstances because they're very little affected. So in a way, it's justifiable that they may cluster because they're all seeking the same type of power, the same type of environment to thrive. The other part of that is, which is to me the most complicated, to me the complicated part is not the narcissists themselves, because like I said, it's a condition that may not even be curable ever, but it is the enabling, mechanisms and systems that surround them that elevate them. And these people don't thrive alone. They typically have their enablers with them, protecting them, being their second pair of eyes and ears into the organization, and making sure that those who can get in the way of what they're trying to achieve and those who threaten their power get the consequences of what they deserve for doing that. And so they always they never walk alone. They never thrive alone. They always are surrounded by either their own kind or the people that elevate them and protect them.
Okay. So I can understand why other narcissists would gravitate, because they can see that they can use each other. If you're not a narcissist, but you're an enabler of a narcissist, is that because you've been hoodwinked by the charisma and that you're being manipulated? Is there some other attraction to being an enabler of a narcissist?
I think it could be either the enabler gets something out of it, right? They're benefiting. They're being rewarded for being loyal. If the narcissist is thriving, the enablers are thriving with them. And they're all moving together, right? And teams. And there is also the enabling that happens from those who don't speak up, and for those who become bystanders, from those who are seeing what's happening and choose not to say anything. Either because they're fearful, because they don't want to become targets, because they don't want to lose their jobs. Again, legitimately, there are many reasons why you will be paralyzed to say anything or report anything or take action on anything. Or because they also see the rewards that come with it and maybe at some point would love to be brought along. And so they're part of the system and create the conditions for these type of behaviors to continue to happen. Meanwhile, the victims, the people that speak truth to power, the people that get scapegoated, become ejected from the circles, most of the time out of the organization altogether.
Okay, so we've done a great diagnosis of the systemic failures in organizations and how individuals contribute either by being enablers or silent bystanders, often with very legitimate reasons to stay silent. what else can we do apart from system redesign to help deal with or prevent this kind of abusive behavior?
I think we need to look into the layers as to how this takes place to begin with, because I don't think there's an easy solution. And the institutional level is complicated. However, we need to start looking into practices, policies, a better introspection of what is ethical and non-ethical in an organization when it comes to the treatment of people, and to believing the experiences that others bring up when there is an escalation, when there is a complaint, when there is a report, instead of dismissing it from the get-go based on implicit bias or based on, other agendas that the organization is using to protect themselves. There's got to be a little bit more sensitized way to look at reports of, incidents in the workplace at the institutional level, in order to use those incidents as data that can help us make better decisions for what practices are necessary. Now, that's a big undertaking. That's depending, right, on the organization, the leader, the mindset, the values, and all the things that make organizations who they are. But I think it's extremely necessary. I also think at the individual level, we need to focus on we can control. If we are on the recipient end, if we are mistreated, if we are in a situation where something feels like it's off and it's not in alignment with how you are treated with dignity, we need to educate ourselves to identify what that is and how we speak about it and how we document it and how we find support. It is kind of unfair that we end up being the ones having to equip ourselves as to how to navigate those circumstances. But not being equipped is very detrimental to our physical health, our mental health. It puts our careers on the line, does not give us the capacity to plan an exit strategy if that's what you get to have to do because you're being targeted by these individuals. And I also feel like at the individual level, each of us need to become more critical of who we look up to as a leader. What is our framework? What is our value system to identify somebody that we feel we want to follow, we want to believe, we want to become like, and have very clear ideas as to who do we consider a leader, whether they have a title or not, in our lives, to be able to have a frame of reference, to be able to have something to compare to when we see an individual behaving in a certain way and find it kind of weird that that's not the reference that you have of what a leader should be. And with that, we empower ourselves to become more acquainted with where we want to be, who we want to work for, and how do we want to become a leader ourselves to help eradicate, right, these type of dysfunctions in the future with the impact we can make.
Thank you, Lindsay. So I think there's some systemic work we need to do. There's this idea of personal empowerment and also the idea of interrogating what is a good and ethical leader, what are good and ethical policies. Phew, thank goodness there's a pathway forward, even though it's not easy. Lindsay, are you ready for the Fast Five?
I am.
Okay. What's the future technology you want most right now?
I would like a system, and I don't know if it exists or not, but I think we need a technology that leverages what we know today about AI and generative, artificial intelligence in support of creating, measuring, and documenting healthy work environments. I think technology could help with that in aggregating data, in creating informed reports that leaders can use to continue to make decisions based on the patterns and the tendencies and the trends that organizations may present through that data collected from employees directly, to determine or not, and to diagnose or not, whether or not their organization environments are going in the direction they want to go. And so that would be a dream come true if we could do that everywhere.
I think we have the technology. We just need to start applying it. Number 2, what's the best tip you ever got for leadership?
I wouldn't say it's a tip, but early in my career, I was really lucky to work for somebody who taught me the value of integrity and not compromising my name, my values, and my convictions for anything or anybody. And to be strong when my values, my conviction, and my morals are being put into risk, so that I can either remove myself or advocate for myself appropriately.
Wow, that's powerful. Thank you. Number 3, what's one problem at work you'd love to wave a magic wand and be fixed right now?
This is going to sound surprising, but I would love, I would love to resolve this issue of, these kind of very pervasive, erosive, and propagated issues of abuse. Big or small, whether it is something super consequential or whether it is somebody experiencing, verbal abuse or belittling or something that, crashes their identity, their spirit, their confidence on a daily basis, that we were more educated, that we could come together and coexist better as humans and understand that nobody wins when these things are taking place.
Okay. Thank you. Number 4, thumbs up or thumbs down. Who's a leader that's doing something right and who's a leader that's doing something wrong?
Oh my gosh. Well, the leader that I think, so I'll be honest with you. I think that we are going through a really profound leadership crisis altogether. I'm having a hard time to find somebody public, in the public eye, that you can truly look up to and be like, oh my gosh, this person is somebody I would definitely follow and do whatever this person says and would want to model, and copy their ways to lead others. In my personal life, I do know a couple people who are doing it right. They're going straight to the issues. They're speaking up about the issues that are important right now in the workplace, like workplace abuse and, human rights in the workplace and fairness in the workplace, equality, inclusion. And they're doing it behind the scenes, quietly but powerfully. And I admire the value and the tenacity and the courage that these normal people from the streets are putting into the game to change it. And it's something I would love to, I continue to do my own strives to join, although what they're doing in their own ecosystems is just something, I don't think I will ever be able to do with my own influence. And something wrong that I think a leader may be doing, I think what's happening in corporate America today is absolutely unethical and unacceptable. The amount of people that are being laid off in droves is, for a country, as rich and as emblematic as America, it's a little contradicting and it's a little demotivating. And I think it's a combination of leadership practices that are not going in the direction of supporting humanity and supporting growth and supporting all of us to thrive and be successful. And it's leaving a lot of people off the hooks. And I think it's very, very, very wrong.
Okay. Thank you for observing that. You're right. There is a leadership crisis. There are glimmers of hope, and we need to root those out and showcase them as a path and a beacon for how to move things toward a more equitable and fair and ethical world. Now, last question. What is your favorite leadership book or podcast, aside from this one, of course?
So yes, and I've been, one of my most favorites, and it's a new one that it's existed for a while, but I just came across to it. It's called The Path, and it's hosted by the LinkedIn CEO, the LinkedIn community. And it showcases stories of leaders, CEOs, political leaders, activists that haven't taken a linear path to success and present them in the nuance that it is to pursue a career, to pursue a dream, to pursue a passion, that it kind of sometimes take you in a zigzag and into places that you never know you would go, and how the dots connect looking backwards. And it's very validating to my own journey, at least, where, I'm always brought into circumstances that seem to fit in the journey, but sometimes come out of very random places. And their stories are very, very fascinating.
Lindsay, thank you so much. I look forward to, I'm going to root out or unearth that LinkedIn podcast, The Path, and have a look myself. That sounds awesome. The Zoe Routh Leadership Podcast is proudly sponsored by the Amplifiers Academy. It is an online self-paced leadership development program that you can join at any time and progress at your pace. There are very short video lessons, great checklists and resources and recommendations and book summaries, all there to help boost your leadership thinking and abilities. We focus on leading strategy, leading culture, leading change, and leading performance. So if you want a go-to resource that can help boost your strategic abilities immediately, check us out, Amplifiers Academy, on the zoerouth.com website. Lindsay, where can people find out more about what you do, your insights, etc.? Where can they connect with you?
They can connect with me on LinkedIn. I have I post all of my reflections and the things that I talk about there for now. Is Lindsay Ruiz. Lindsay is LINDSAY RUIZ. And that's the easiest way. And they can DM me if anybody has a question or is going through any particular situation that's relatable to what we talked about here. More than happy to sit down and be a support system.
Thank you, Lindsay. That's a very generous offer. And unfortunately, I suspect there'll be a lot of people wanting to take that up. Not unfortunate that they're wanting to reach out, but unfortunate that there's that many people experiencing this kind of abuse at the hands of narcissists. Thank you so much for this really incredible insight. It was something that I didn't know that much about, a little bit, having done a bit of research about that for my book, People Stuff. But to see how pervasive and systemic it is, it was eye-opening. So thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing all of your great wisdom and insight and your research with us.
Yeah, you're welcome. I'm glad that we could have this conversation and spread the awareness a little bit more.
So plenty of juicy stuff in that conversation. I just know there's lots of people listening who would have had experiences with narcissists and could be nodding along going, been there, I get that, I've seen that. And yeah, it's probably a lot more pervasive than we think. And when we're looking at systemic changes that need to happen, is both in the organizational design, but I also come back to the individual. How did this emotional wound happen for the individual? And what can we do as a society to stop that from happening? How do we create safe cultures, not just in the workplace, but in our communities, so that people are less wounded and less having to cover up with things like narcissism? So that's a big picture kind of rumination I'd like to noodle on for a while. My takeaway is really to dig into, how do we choose our leaders? How do we manage promotions? How do we recognize leadership? How do we select for talent? And what kind of behaviors get rewarded in organizations? And I think some good hard look at ourselves is really required here, because it is so easy to devolve to the charming, extroverted, popular individual who is seen and heard, as opposed to other types of behavior that are progressive and contributing, which don't necessarily have a song and dance about them. So those two questions, how do we choose our leaders and what kind of behavior get rewarded, are really important questions I think all of us can dig into to examine how we can start then to make systemic change in our organizations, so we have more psychologically safe organizations or more robust, healthy environments. My tip today comes out of People Stuff, Beyond Personality Problems, an Advanced Handbook for Leadership, my multiple award-winning book. Still rings beautifully, doesn't it? I love talking about it. And as I mentioned in the interview with Lindsay, I did a little section of research on narcissism, and I'm just going to read out what I mention about this in the book. It's in the Q&A section where I did have a question from my audience when I was doing the research. How do you deal with narcissists? So this is my answer in the book. First, a narcissist is someone who lacks empathy and a sense of others. Their primary concern is for themselves, as Lindsay confirmed. Successful narcissists in the workplace are very smart and can be great individual contributors. The brilliant jerk is another term for them. Because of this, they are hard to spot when they are not in leadership positions. It's only when they are in a group context that we might see how their behavior shows selfish tendencies. With any high potential leaders, we want to see them extend themselves and even experience some failure. Of course, we need to ensure we have created a safe experiment and fail work culture first. How people process and experience failure is a great indicator of self-awareness and willingness to grow. If they default to blame shifting, they may exhibit signs of narcissism. In any case, blame shifting is not an attribute we want in our leaders. If we suspect one of our team members is a narcissist, we can view them with compassion. They too have a perspective, often a really rough past, that has led to their self-absorbed outlook. Yet, we need to be sensible as well as sensitive. If they are a peer, distance yourself from them socially. If they are a direct report, be aware of appointing them to leadership roles. And if they're your boss, time to move teams. Okay, that last sentence was not in the book, but I think that's what a lot of people may be thinking. I have a narcissist for a boss. It's not a safe place to be, is it? So I would reconsider what you're doing there. And don't become an enabler. So up next on the show, we've got a solo-sode on embedding creativity. Creativity is one of the superpowers we need for the future of leadership. And this is not just about being a creativity in the sense of craft or writing or art. It's about how we think creatively in the workplace. So we'll be doing an episode, a deep dive on that. Also, did you know that when you sign up to get regular notifications of this podcast on my website, go to zoeralph.com, click on podcast, you can get a free audio, which was a secret bonus for when I launched the book People Stuff. And the audio is how to deal with difficult people. And it goes through the 4 devils of people stuff, how to spot them and how to deal with them. So that's a free audio when you sign up to get notifications of the podcast. All right. I would love to have you as a regular subscriber. You won't miss a single episode. You get bonus extras in terms of my ongoing insights and shenanigans and special offers to podcast listener subscribers. All that at zoeralph.com. Click on podcasts and sign up for the weekly news updates. All right. I hope you have an excellent, brilliant week. In the meantime, live well, lead well.
You've been listening to the Zoe Routh Leadership Podcast. To find out more about leadership of the future or to contact Zoe, go to zoerouth.com.